So here we go again, 5 more card designs to share with you. My first idea, actually my first 2 ideas, are to create a large poinsettia background. I'm going to do 2 different versions just to show you how I can change it up, get a similar but different look. It is a huge stamp, and normally I would just use one of these images on a card, but I want to try and get a couple on one piece of cardstock. So I have kind of had to squish it into my Misty stamping tool, and that doesn't matter because I only need to create a portion that's big enough for the front of my card. So I'm not worried that it didn't stamp perfectly the first time. Now I have used some green ink for the outline of this flower to kind of get a no-line look, but not really. It's still dark enough that you're going to be able to see the lines, but it's not as dark as a black inked stamp would look. I wanted to change up my color combo today, and I'm using creams and greens and gold as my base colors for all of the flowers. And for this first card, I actually came in and did the cream layer for the first few bracts or the leaves of the poinsettias, and then I've come in with the green over top. I haven't actually come in with a second neutral tone. I just thought it would be fun to change it up and add the green layers instead. Now I will list everything that I've used today in the description below, whatever will fit there. Otherwise, head to my blog post because you'll find heaps more details there as well, and lots of pictures. So if you want to find more inspiration, you can do that. And you might notice how quickly these flowers are coloured using the coordinating stencils. So if you are a bit pushed for time, having a stamp with coordinating stencils really can be a game changer and speed things up. Now I've got my A2 window here that I'm kind of placing to kind of work out how I'm going to finish off my design, how big it needs to be. And I've lined them up, and I did exactly the same process for the second flower. The sentiment today, I thought it'd be fun to do some hot foiling, and this one says Happy Holidays, and I am holding my hot foil die in place with some low tack tape here, and I'm really glad that I did because I wasn't particularly happy with the way that it foiled the first time. And by having that tape there, it's almost like a hinge. I can refoil over, and I know it's going to be in exactly the same spot as long as I try not to shift it. Do make sure if you do this technique not to shift it, but also to use a fresh piece of foil on the second run through your machine. And I was much happier with how it turned out the second time. A little bit of overfoiling, but that doesn't worry me because I can simply brush that away. This design here would be fantastic as a card to post. It is basically one layer, except when I added the sequins, but you'll see that in a moment. One thing that I do love about my rectangle dies, I've got some A2 layering dies, is that I can kind of line them up and make sure that my image and everything is perfectly straight before I cut it out to fit the front of my card. I held off on buying rectangle dies, nesting dies for many years, thinking, well, I can just cut them with my trimmer, and you can, and I did that for many years, but now that I've invested in them, it is a game changer, and I use them so much more than I thought I ever would. All right, so I wanted to add a bit of depth to my flowers today, and this was really easy to do. I just chose some pencils. I'm using Prismacolor ones here today, and I'm just choosing colors that are very similar to the ones that are in the actual stamp colors. Now that doesn't make sense. I didn't say that right. I'm using colors that are similar to the colors that I stenciled with. That makes more sense. I've also come in with some gold ink splatter today on a lot of my designs. You'll see that they kind of all match. I like to try and bring the same elements in on all the cards. It's why it stops me. I don't have to think about things so much. I already know my color combos, and I already know I'm going to add the gold. I will or will not add the splatter if I want, or the sequins, or whatever embellies I choose. It just makes more fun when I'm actually creating. I don't have to think so hard. So another idea, if you don't have a large poinsettia stamp, just simply use a smaller one and stamp it multiple times over the front of a card to create your own background pattern. So like I said, this is going to be a very similar card, but instead of having to colour the base layer of my images cream like I did on the first design, I cheated and I've used some ivory cardstock. So the other thing I've changed up here is that I'm going to be doing some gold heat embossing for the images. I thought I'd try using the stamp wheel this time because I was hoping it might make a bit of a difference with trying to fit this large stamp on a piece of cardstock twice. It was much the same, and I was able to do enough of an impression from the image using either of the tools. I really like how the gold outline looked, and I was able to come in and add my colour with the stencils like I did on my first design, but this time I could miss that very first layer of colour because I already had the ivory cardstock in the background. Obviously on the leaf portions of the images, I did come in and put both layers of the green because I wanted them to be a bit bolder. And I didn't come in with pencils this time to add the extra depth, but you could certainly do that if you prefer. You may also notice that I used a sticky grid mat in the background to hold my stencils in place. There are lots of different tools out there that you can use, but often I just hold them in place without the grid mat. The grid mat really does help though. I added a simple heat embossed sentiment, which I cut with and laid up with some circle dies. A die cut sentiment would work beautifully on this design as well. Alright, so we're on to the third card now, and I'm going for a very modern look this time. So what I've got here is a Poinsettia layering die, or a 3D layering die, and I've got some striped green cardstock as well as some of the ivory cardstock yet again, and I'm going to cut out all my layers and assemble them. I'm just using some liquid glue, which I know is going to hold it very well. You could also use glue dots or whatever your preference is, or dotted tape would work as well. And this is really quick and easy to layer up, and I love the way that the stripes look in the background. To me, it makes it look very modern and bold. I also decided to add a bold sentiment to keep that real modern look. I used some black pigment ink, and then I could pop up the flower with just a really thin foam dot. I didn't want to add too much more dimension because it's already got the 4 layers of cardstock. And this time I came in with some pearls or gold pearls, and I love that this particular combination has lots of different sizes of the pearls, but you could also use sequins here or even just Nouveau drops, whatever you have. Now I wanted to create a second version of that card, but this time have a bit more of a traditional take on it. And I've got some crepe paper here. This is a really pretty combination of crepe papers. It's a fine one though. So what I have been doing with this particular crepe paper is cutting 2 layers at a time. So I'll fold it over and then I can run it through my die cutting machine just with the same sandwich that I use for cardstock. Because I've cut the 2 layers of crepe paper though, I do have to re-adhere them together, so I'm using my liquid glue. I'm finding that works really well as long as I don't put it anywhere that's going to be visible afterwards, because when you apply the liquid glue to the crepe paper it can be seen afterwards, especially this fine crepe paper. And then I just added all the layers together like I did on the previous card, and it just gives a totally different look to the flower. The first one was a real kind of bold modern look, but by using the crepe paper this time it just gives that soft and more, to me it's more traditional. Especially when I use this particular sentiment, I found like this font and adding it on the angle, it kind of reminds me of a more traditional or retro style Christmas card. Let me know what you think, if you agree with that, in the comments below. I did come in and add some cardstock behind my crepe paper flower because I wanted to make sure that it didn't come off the front of the card. And then this is where I came in and I thought it'd be fun to add some more splatters with the ink. No, I didn't like it. I totally mucked up the white bracts that I put on the flower. So I pulled it apart, re-die cut them and reassembled it. No one will ever know, ever, no one will be able to tell that I did that. Except you, me. But you won't tell, I'm sure. And I just want to let you know that when I do add something like the pearls or embellishments, often I'll use a bit of extra liquid glue behind them to make sure that they don't come off in the post. All right, now for my bonus card, and this is a very simple one. It would be great to mass produce. It is also a very modern design. I'm using a 3D embossing folder and some ivory cardstock. The embossing folder is the Poinsettia or Poinsettias. I think there's 3 altogether on this panel. And you can kind of cut out whichever portion you want, use as much as you want. Look at the detail in that. It is beautiful. And I've decided to do a bold sentiment again and keep that kind of modern look. I'm using some gold embossing powder, and this sentiment is huge. It's a real focal point on a card, but you're still going to be able to see the pattern and the depth of the 3D embossing folder in the background. And I love that this particular sentiment has a coordinating shadow die, because that way I could pop it up on the front of the card. The other thing you could do if you don't have a sentiment like this is create your own with die cuts, and die cut some gold cardstock and add it to the front of a card. That would look great too. I used some 1/2 inch strong score tape to add the embossing folder to the card front because of all the dimension, just to make sure that it's not going anywhere. And I also added a sweet little white heart with some liquid glue because it's going on top of the heat embossed portion. And I don't want that to come off either. It's all about keeping your cards together until after people get them for Christmas. Then they can do whatever they want with them. So all together now, I started with the Poinsettia background using the large Poinsettia stamp. I've got 2 versions of that. One where I coloured all the layers and did some no line. The second one is with the gold embossing. My bonus card with the 3D embossing folder and the big fun sentiment. Another bold modern design using the die cut poinsettia, and they use the die cut poinsettia again with the crepe paper. Let me know in the comments below which one's your favourite and if you can guess which one's mine. I do hope that this inspires you to create with some poinsettias this year for Christmas. And if you do, I'd love you to share them with me at social media. Just tag me at Lostinpaper. And don't go away, I've got 2 more videos right here for you to enjoy. I look forward to seeing you there. Till next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.